Welcome to the Blueprint Podcast. This podcast was created to offer a clear, practical perspective on what it really means to lead, build, and grow in alignment with strong values and a clear mission, especially in an industry that often tells us there's only one way to be successful. My name is Angelica. I'm the CEO of Stansel Construction, and I believe the blueprint for meaningful success isn't about doing things the loudest or the fastest. It's about building with intention, clarity, and integrity. Today's episode is a conversation with our Chief Operating Officer, Andy. We're talking about urgency, specifically the difference between moving fast and moving with intention, because speed without discipline doesn't create results, it creates chaos. Andy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Angelica.
All right, before we dive in, I have a question that is going to be something I ask guests moving forward. So I didn't tell you about this one.
The
Sorry about
surprise.
that. All right. When you think about your career or leadership journey, what is one part of your blueprint that has changed over time?
It's a great question. I started at McDonald's and kind of got put into a leadership role fairly quickly after I started. I became a construction manager about 4 years in my career after being a project manager. And I kind of went in it with, well, this is the way I project manage, so this is the way you need a project management. So, it took me some time to realize there's other ways of doing things, just like you said, that we
Mm,
can do things differently and still be effective. I kind of was that naive individual that felt like, well, my way is the best way. And, it took me a couple of years to have some leadership experience and realize that uh, a lot of people around you have great opinions and great ways of approaching the business if you just open your ears and listen. So, about 5, 6, 7 years in, I really focused on listening more
mm.
and understanding different perspectives. Really helped me grow my career from there, even to the point when got to the national level with McDonald's. A lot of what I did was listen and share other people's perspectives with other people across the country.
That's a really good answer.
Yeah,
It's
I
almost,
practiced it.
yeah. That was really good. Thanks, Andy. All right, so let's dive into these questions about urgency without chaos. So, when people hear the word urgency, they often think speed. So I want to know, how do you define urgency and how is it different from chaos?
I think you said it earlier. It's a lot about intention, right? When you think about urgency, it's not about moving fast. It's about moving with intention, moving quickly, making sure that you have clarity on priorities, making sure you had clarity on roles, responsibilities, but most importantly, what's the desired outcome? What are we trying to achieve versus just moving fast? And urgency, it means solving the right problem at the right time, not just doing things faster. Again, I think a lot of people hear the word urgency, and like you said, everyone thinks that means just move fast. It
Mm,
doesn't. When you think of chaos, chaos is defined as kind of unmanaged motion, right? Just lots of stuff happening around you, and you're constantly firefighting. There's unclear ownership of who owns what task. Whereas in urgency, teams plan, they anticipate. In chaos, teams react and recover. A great way to think about it is to really help you define whether you're operating in urgency or if you're operating in chaos is ask yourself, is your pace repeatable?
mm.
If it's repeatable, it's urgency. If it's exhausting and you're tired at the end of the day every day, it's chaos.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. When, where do you, from your experience, see teams confuse reacting with executing? And then why does reaction feel productive in the moment?
I experienced this early in my career as well. Is I used to chase the loudest issue,
Mm,
right? The person that was griping or the issue was the loudest is what I chased, and I didn't take a step back to really identify what was the most important one. So teams that react, when they chase the loudest issues instead of the most important ones, they're operating in that chaos category. So it's really identifying those critical points, critical paths, and making sure that the issues that you are chasing aren't just necessarily the loudest ones, that they're the most important ones at that time. And the other part of it is when we talk about teams that feel like they're being productive, it's they're constantly emailing or making calls and working on field problems. That can create a false sense of accomplishment.
mm,
You get a fire thrown at you on Monday morning when you wake up, and you get that fire put out by the end of the day. Monday, you feel like, hey man, we did great,
yeah.
but what's next, right? What have you planned for now? You've taken away the time to be able to plan and anticipate, and you're in the firefight mode. Execution, it requires planning, it requires coordination, and sometimes patience, which is kind of counterintuitive. When people hear the word patience and urgency, it's almost counterintuitive. But if you think about it, it can really feel like patience is slower in the moment. But a lot of times you hear the term slow down to speed up,
Mm.
and that's where you can really catch up that time or create that urgency. Um, and then a couple other points about it. Reaction, when people are reacting, it's visible. Execution is often quiet and systematic, and you don't necessarily feel it or see it in a visible way, but things are being executed at a high level because people have planned, and they're executing the plan and not just reacting. And the last thing I'd say about it is, a question that I ask when we're trying to figure out which kind of where are we is, are we preventing the next problem or just surviving this one?
Ooh, I like that. I heard that. So some people think that process slows teams down. In your experience, how do standards and processes actually allow teams to move faster without sacrificing quality?
It's a great question. When you think about the alignment that's needed on a job site, processes eliminate rework. How often do we talk about having to go back and fix something that we didn't do correctly? But if we was a process, or if we would have followed our processes, we could have avoided that rework. Rework is not just a time drain, but it's a resource drain across the board, right? It's a cost for us to redo, it's a cost for the trade partner. But then also what it does is it takes you from moving forward on the next thing that you should be focusing on, and now you're focusing on something now twice, three times, four times,
Mm.
and that just creates that slowdown on project. So checklists and playbooks, shift the thinking from what do we do to let's execute.
Mm.
When expectations are predictable, trade partners can perform better and faster. And again, if we're following processes and procedures, that gives us the consistency that we need to be able to have trust from our trade partners that when we tell them they're going to be out at the job site and it's ready for them, that we are. We get them there, we give them the ability to do the work and move forward. We often have conversation about our customers not being ready for us and the frustration and impact it has on us.
Mm.
It's the same conversation that we have to have and reflect on ourselves and hold ourselves accountable to for our trade partners. If we tell them that the site's ready and they get there and they can't do the work and they've driven 3 hours for it, that's time wasted. It's resources wasted, and it just creates more drag on the project.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So obviously, when urgency increases, quality tends to be the first thing at risk. So, how would you say that disciplined teams protect the quality while still moving fast?
Yeah, under pressure, people sometimes shortcut coordination and other processes to quote save time. But at the end of the day, a lot of the times those shortcuts come back to bite us. So we end up redoing. I think, did we take the time to measure sidewalks and ensure 2% slope? No, we didn't. And now we're out there tearing it up. But small misses compound. Rework always costs more time and than just doing it right the first time. So disciplined teams, they build quality into the plan, not just say, hey, we'll catch it at the punch list. They protect the critical path work by ensuring work is truly ready before it starts, like we talked about earlier. We reinforce that speed is meaningless if we lose the confidence of the customer. And the first way to lose confidence of the customer is to deliver quality that's not acceptable to them or to us. And then last thing around quality is there's a saying in the industry is fast and right beats fast and twice every time.
I want to go back to you mentioned the client a little bit, and my next question is around like the long-term cost of choosing speed over discipline. I would imagine that the answer would be the effects on us doing more work with the customer.
Everyone remembers a job getting finished fast. Uh, they talk about how quick it was done. Uh, but what has a more lasting memory is when you go to that job a year after, 2 years after, and is the quality there? People seem to forget that speed, right? If the quality is not there, the quality is the everlasting piece that we leave on a project. The speed comes and goes, the urgency comes and goes, but the quality will always be there. You walk up and you see a project that you built, and you built it in 80 days. Do you feel proud about it? Yes. But if you walk up and you see people looking and pointing at the quality of your project in a positive way, what feels better? I've always leaned towards the quality. quality last, that speed will come and go and be forgotten at some point.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say, like, beyond the field, that also applies to what a lot of us do in the office, too, of like, the quality of your work and the attention to detail that you provide, that's going to be lasting longer than, just getting something done really quick.
For sure. When you think about the quality, is if the quality gives, you talk a little bit about it earlier with us, you're going to lose work from customers. The profits erode.
Mm-hmm.
Teams burn out. Reputation suffers. Trade partners start pricing at risk, making us less competitive.
Mm,
Culture shifts from pride and quality to survival mode, which is never a good place for anybody to be
right.
in business.
Absolutely. No good. All right, I have one more question, and I didn't give you this one either. My final question: what is one part of the blueprint that you are still building?
I think one of the parts of the blueprint that we're still building and improving upon. Hard to say building, but I think improving upon is, a lot of work that Anthony's doing is around the efficiency in the process piece.
Mm,
We talked about process earlier. We don't ever want to become a company that is bogged down in process and checklists and for every single thing. We want autonomy for people to be able to make decisions and move forward, but we want the framework of the process to be there to where it becomes repeatable.
yeah.
We talk a lot about in business, you create a repeatable process, you can create success time after time again. Companies, people that don't have that type of process in place, they can be successful at points, but consistency uh, uh, really falters often. And you end up with a situation where, a contractor today is great because they did something really well, but the next year when they do it again, because they don't have that process in place to repeat it, they're now not that great contractor anymore, right? And we've
Mm,
seen that with some of our competitors.
mm.
So the process improvement part of the blueprint is still what I think we're still improving upon.
Awesome. Good answer. Well, I'll wrap it up because this was a really, really great episode. But urgency isn't about doing more. It's about doing the right things well. So, for those listening today, I want to leave you with a question, per usual. Ask yourself, where am I reacting instead of executing? And what would disciplined urgency look like in my role? So, thank you so much, Andy, for joining us today and for sharing your perspective on urgency and disciplined execution. But until next time, let's go win. See y'all. Peace.